Today, your main man returns. A friend of mine pointed out to me that I did not have a video on how to play Mage the Ascension. Now, with Mage the Ascension 20 out, successfully kickstarted, at least that game line has been relaunched, if by a powerful resurrection spell. And hey, after all, that's magic, isn't it? Taking that dead game line and bringing it back, the classic World of Darkness game, which is absolutely excellent at executing the opportunity of playing a magi in the real world, in the flesh and blood, you understand, and in the tall shadow of skyscrapers. Now, there are a lot of videos on my channel, more videos on my channel about Mage the Ascension than anywhere else in the multiverse. Check them out, click, watch, look for my video on Nefondi. I think this is my best one from the line, Marauders, Technocracy. I have videos on a ton of things Mage related, and you could really bone up on that. How to storytell Mage. You can watch my two-part, like 3.5 hour long interview with Mage co-creator Phil Mercado. And he really says a lot of interesting things there. Really open and honest, going all over the multiverse with your main man as the versatility is Dante, and really allowing a lot of insight into what's actually going on to the mind process of the creative aspect that brought this creative creation to you. Now, what Mage really is possibility on the end of that pin called RPG. That's what's so wonderful about it. Now, when making a Mage character, you want to do the same thing that you do when making any character. It's that concept. Make a character, play the character, stay in character. It's really all that simple. That means what image you see in your mind, use the points you're allocated throughout the design system to come as absolutely close to that image as possible. That's what you want to do. That's what you wanted to play. That's your image, your thought, your birth brainchild. Bring them to life. That's what you want to do when you're bringing this sort of game or any role-playing game. Don't cheat yourself. Don't play by numbers. Don't power game. Don't min-max, because you're cheating yourself. You're cheating other players. You're cheating the game master. Make that wonderful idea that you had, that you wanted to play. Make them different than yourself. Make them interesting and entertaining. Make them appropriate to the theme and the feel and the mood and the tone of the game. And I have videos on how to actually make a character just in general. So we're not going to go too much over that. We're going to go over and talk about a bit of what the differences are from Mage. Now, Mage is from the old World of Darkness line. Before I get into that, let's give a shout out to Hercules1. That's right, Hercules1. You know who you are, and I know who you are, and you're out there, baby, watching this Mage the Ascension video. So make sure you enjoy that and stay tuned as well. Now, where you start really is with that concept. We've already talked a little bit about that. So let's move along to talking about your avatar, that shard of God that lives inside you, that broken bit of an ancient demigod, or your shadow, your angel, whatever, your totem, whatever you want that avatar to be. It can come across in a lot of different ways, because the wonderful thing about a game that is possibility are options, and it's liquid and it's fluid. And don't bar yourself down to a certain way of thinking. Think about, well, how can we make this different and cool? And that really should come across in your magic too. Don't go, oh, I have correspondence 2, entropy 1, and life 4, and prime 7, and 18 dots of correspondence as well is also 1. And how do I just cast this ridiculous thing? No. Think about what you do. Do you draw that special strange symbol on the ground with angelic script and bizarre Kabbalistic elements and aspects? Do you bring off feathers from 7 different kinds of birds and burn them 1 minute before midnight? Do you take the skull of your dead grandfather and bury it in the ground for a day? And when you pull it up, pull the worms out of it and eat the worms, and that has your ability to cast it. It's about the casting of the spell. It's about the ritual. It's about that. You're jacking yourself completely out of the cool factor if you don't have a way that your character has a focus and has a particular design for how he implements his spheres. It should never be just, oh, I can do this. It's how do you do it? What does it come across? Describe. But that collaborative narrative, make it wonderful, make it beautiful, make it pop, make that scene awesome. When you're casting a spell in any game, you should always make it come across awesome, because that's your time on stage. You don't want to be the guy on stage that everyone's fast forwarding through. You don't. You want to be the guy on stage that people go, oh yeah, I can get with that. And you want to have the other players, the game master. If you play in front of an audience, such as a Google Plus YouTube experience or experience otherwise, you want to have that experience. You want people to stop and go, oh, and they look and they watch and they're entertained by what you're doing. Whether it's a live audience or it's an audience via the internet, you want to sit there and entertain them. That's one of the easiest ways you can do that is by getting in there and understanding what your character does, approaching it. When you just boil it down to systems, that's a problem. A mage has some systems in it, but you want to use them to facilitate your role playing. So, Mage, like the other World of Darkness games, has 9 stats. Your physical, social, and mental, and you have 1 point in each of them, and then you have 7, 5, and 3 to distribute amongst them. Some game masters do it a little bit differently. So, you basically get to build your character. How strong is he? How attractive is he? How witty is he? How intellectual is he? These are things that you get to build. How also you get to build their abilities, which you get 13, 9, and 5. You can distribute those however you want along the columns of the character sheet. Now, everything is going to be covered in there. Your academics, your knowledge of the law, your ability to fight, your understanding of etiquette or of leadership, how street smart you are. These sort of things are covered. So you get to bring, again, that concept you had. How does he think? What is she like? And bring those things about on your character. And, of course, Mage, while it is set for being a modern in-Earth game where you get to play in Chicago or New Orleans or Paris or in Sydney, you also could just as very easily use this system, drop it in the middle of Forgotten Realms. Use this system, drop it in the middle of a game set way in the future, in the past. You could use it for period pieces. You could use it for any sort of fantasy or science fiction world. It really works absolutely anywhere, and it has elements. You can run this game with steampunk, with dark fantasy, with a very gritty, real urban feel to it. You can run it with a light, more comical feel to it, with a more cartoonish aspect, with a more serious aspect. You can make it visceral. You can make it anything that you want. That's one of the real wonders of Mage. Now, it has umbras and other worlds that your character can visit and travel, where you have realizations of thought and possibility in the astral, in the different forms of spirit lands that exist in this game. They take these fictitious concepts and they make them come alive like thought bubbles, and it's very interesting, the potential and possibility that you have there. Now, typically, people play one of the traditions or a hollow one. That's typically what you play. But you can play a Nefandi, you can play a Marauder, you can play a members of the Technocracy. And I have videos where we talk about that. So we're just going to talk a little about the traditions. So, or you could be an orphan, which means you have no tradition. But let's just say here you're a tradition. You select Euthanatos, which is a death mage. Or you select a Cult of Ecstasy, who are the Sensates. Or a Verbena, who's an old school or new school pagan. A Dream Speaker, who's shamanic. An Order of Hermes, who is this academic, Masonic sort of mage, a celestial chorus, who have a very New Age version of God, but there's one, and they follow that. So conceptually, you could play whatever you want. You could play a Muslim cleric. You could play a saintly Catholic. You could play a scientific-minded atheist who is who's a doctorate in genetics. And you can play a wonderful computer programmer who understands intricacies of computer beyond what is in any way, shape, or form possible. And you can fit into one of the many different traditions. I'm not going to go through all of them. But you select a tradition that you're going to belong to, or your game master storyteller might select one for you, depending on the nature of the chronicle. You select an essence. An essence is pretty important because you have pattern and you have primordial. So let me just talk about some of the. You have your questing and your dynamic. Now, dynamic is really sort of personified by the Marauders. Not that all Marauders have that, but it is that wild. It's, if you understand, dynamic is the force of the wild, and it is creativity, creation. And a lot of mages in the traditions will have this, as well as questing, which is also very common there. But primordial is going to be really personified by your Nefandi. It's that ancient eldritch shadow out of time that lurks up from the past, where you have perhaps a more nihilistic understanding of the universe. And then you have pattern, which is going to be the type of rigidity of thought shown by the scientific community, which is often sort of lauded in World of Darkness games, and is really common to the Technocracy. So you can have those sort of different mental casts of your avatar, of your essence, and that can interact with yourself. And you can really kind of play that interesting too. You can have that essence as well as having a character who doesn't necessarily fully get along with his avatar, and that could be a very interesting story as the avatar and the player struggle for a direction inside the body where they don't necessarily get along, and you don't have to. And that itself can be very interesting. Your avatar can certainly be a player, particularly if you invest in the background avatars. You know, make a non-player character out of that and interact with the Game Master a lot. Or maybe, you know, you decide to give it to another player through the Game Master's blessing, and that player can play out your avatar, and you can bounce off each other, and that's sort of reflecting your soul. And the avatar is going to want to have one direction. It's going to want to teach you and coach you and so forth. But maybe it can't. Maybe it won't. Maybe you'll dominate it, or maybe it'll be forced to dominate you, or maybe, you know, it goes back and forth. You know, it's sort of a Hulk and Bruce Banner kind of deal, which can be very interesting and add a lot of depth to your character when you don't just, you know, go that way. Tension can create drama, and drama can really create an excellent game. So that's something to think about when you're looking at a mage character. Of course, you have your nature and demeanor, which are common to most of the World of Darkness lines. It basically just means your demeanor is your mask, how other people perceive you. You might be a visionary or an autocrat, a fanatic, a monster, whatever. And your nature is your true self. What's behind the mask? And my nature and demeanor are both barbarians, so that's an easy one. And they can line up the same for you, but they can also be very, very, very different. Now, you're also going to put your character's name on there, the Chronicle, the player. You're going to want to put your Cabal, which is the group, if you have a name for it, that your character belongs to. The other mages, the other player characters, or perhaps also some NPCs that have been put together for it. That, of course, we already talked about concept. And then there's your tradition, or your Sons of Ether, or your Verbena, or your Order of Hermes. And that can really change the way you, the dynamic through which you practice your magic. And that's, again, very important. We talked about that in the beginning, because we come down here and we have your spheres. There are 9 different spheres. I'm not going to go through all of them right here. I have a video where I talk about them. If you want more information, click on that, so as not to make this too time-consuming. But each of those spheres are different. They allow you different powers. You basically can take reality and change it and twist it and move it just a little bit. But if you move it too much, you get, boom, paradox. And paradox is very difficult. It can take its form in many different ways, but it's essentially reality going, no, this is the way I am. This is what the people want. And reality, shall give them what they want, what they think, what they believe. And that's what mages are warring for. Control of reality. The way that the common man perceives what's going on, and the way the common man believes and perceives, you're going to go with that. You know, that's really the way where you're going to get paradoxes. If you're trying to get people to think in an entirely different new way, that they view as impossible, but it's making that impossible possible. And the technocracy do that better than anyone through the advances of science, which really brings across a lot of the interesting points in the game, because it has this weird political undertones, and that can really make a game far more interesting. And you should always understand that everyone in a situation like that thinks they're right. They're not like, ha ha ha, I think I'm evil and bad. No, the technocracy think they're right. The Nefandi think they're right. The many different fractions of the traditions think they're right. And that can be very interesting, particularly when someone has motivations you think are hideous, but then you as a game master can bring across that character, or you as a player bring them across. And it's like, oh, that's why you think that. That's why you understand. And that can make your character even more entertaining or even more monstrous. It's like, oh, I see why he wants to do that. Oh, that makes sense. Oh, and then it can make the other character mirrored and perhaps think bad things about themselves for, you know, maybe their own extreme ideas or thoughts, or how that works in the world, how that affects things, how that damages. So that's, I think, very important to think across. Your backgrounds, you have ones like Node, for example, and you can collectively share that with the other people in your coterie. You guys have a powerful place that has a lot of mystical energy in it that you control. A node is sort of a two-handed sword. If a node gets really powerful, guess what? People are going to be showing up. They're going to be challenging you. They're going to be haunting you. They're going to want to get that node. A node is going to be wanted by changelings. They use that stuff. It's going to be wanted by werewolves and every kind of weird creature. It's a Karen. It's exactly the same thing. And other mages are going to want it. Technocracy, Nefandi, Marauders, other tradition mages. Other mages from the same tradition as you. They'll think they deserve it. And there's lots of interesting ways that you can use nodes and move them around, almost like plumbing. There's sort of a convergence of ley lines under the earth and a flow of mystical energy. And when just alone, when you construct and understand a node, which maybe I don't know if I've done a video on nodes. Maybe I'll do one if you guys want a video on nodes. That itself is very interesting and entertaining. The concepts and chronicles that you can tell under the construction or the acquisition of a node. You can certainly get backgrounds through hook or by crook. You understand what I'm saying to you? You can go out and take that one away. Maybe you're a foul, filthy, dirty, wretched, rotten squatter chantry. But some of that happens, and you get that big node. You run up on another group maybe there's been a big war, and one group that was once powerful, they've lost like 8 mages, and the other ones are they're all in bad shape. Maybe one of them's in quiet or whatever. You run up there, you're a filthy dirty squatter chantry, and you put the boots to them, and you take that node, and you take their chantry, you take their talismans, and you take their tasks, and all these wonderful different things you could do. So there can certainly be an ebb and flow to gameplay like that. There are certainly absurdly powerful masters, and then there's Umber worlds and other worlds you can visit and explore that I certainly can't even begin to touch on in this video. Now, really the main thing I want to take away, or want you to take away from this, is, you know, when you put your Arit down, which is the potential of magical power you have, which can only start at 3. You can't have more than 3, which means none of your spheres can start at higher than 3. And if your Arit is lower, say if your Arit's only 1, none of your spheres can start higher than your Arit, and your Arit is capped at 3. And it's capped at 3 for a good reason, so you can't just start the game with 4s and 5s, because these spheres are really powerful at high levels. At 1, they're basically sensory. I can see and perceive within this spectrum. I have 1 life. Okay, that thing over there is alive. I have 1 prime. I can pick up on magical feelings and energies. I can pick up on the energy and magic inside another mage, or inside of a node, or inside of a werewolf, whatever. These are important things to understand when you try to quantify and understand the spheres for yourselves. The spheres themselves, be careful. If your game master is selecting, and I always encourage game masters, start them off as mortals, run an awakening scene, and I think on this channel a little bit, I'm going to actually do a little bit of an awakening scene with a friend of mine, and we're going to show you how that goes. You know, what that is, what that looks like, at least at one example. So there's a lot of you guys that ask for that, so perhaps that should be coming, you know, in celebration of Mage 20, and that's basically how you make a mage character. It's very easy. You can also have merits and flaws, things like that, to bolt on. You got your willpower. You have your a wheel of quintessence to paradox. Let me talk about that for a minute. Quintessence is the magical energy you have inside yourself. Paradox, and it's a wheel. And paradox is way over here. So you start crossing your paradox, the amount that the reality is punishing you for attempting to violate it. You're taking the tapestry, the telerium, and you're unwinding it, and you're unchanging it, and you're bending it. And there's lots of different ways you could do that. Don't look at the book. Here's a very important thing for Mage. Don't look at the book and be pedantic about Mage, because you're going to fail right off the rip. You want to look at that book. You want to take, okay, well, this is a base. This is a base. And how do I build from that? How do I build to tell a dynamic, creative, explosive, entertaining story? Because that is what Mage is. That's where the magic lies, and that's what the power is. It's expanding and exploring that creative, ethereal scape, and bending and meshing it, and using that as a base to tell stories about characters who have wonder, awe, a potential power of a god among men, walking through the waking world and changing it. But at the same time, there is always that price to pay for hubris, and that's a wonderful backstory in Mage of itself. It's been your main man for Mage. Pick up your Mage 20. Get involved with that. Get your t-shirts. Get your products. Get a hold of that line, because they're bringing back that classic World of Darkness feel, and that is a great line. Certainly a place where I really cut my teeth as a role player, and certainly as good today as it was in the 90s. You'll enjoy it if you haven't played Mage before. Give it a wing. Give it a try, baby, and you're going to get aboard. And remember, keep on believing, because the magic, woo, is real.